A returnee from the most recent mainline Medarot title, Medarot 9 on the Nintendo 3DS. It is DRA03 Xianglong, the Emerald Dragon type, with the kit of Fire, Double Charge Blade, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Shape Memory, which equalizes total HP across the board and across all parts when charging Metaphors, and will also restore broken parts through this same action. Now, as a returnee from a relatively recent modern title, there really wasn't a lot of modernization that Xianglong would need to go through for making himself compatible for Medarot S. But all the same, he is packing a relatively nasty kit if used correctly, and even if he is Metaphors reliant, he is surprisingly well-rounded if you do choose to use him as a pure set, and he definitely does not disappoint for what he offers as a dragon type. Fire is an ailment-based skill that once inflicted on the enemy will inflict them with a DOT, damage over time, which means that the longer the ailment is there before it is removed, it will slowly whittle the enemy's HP down to 1 HP per part, which of course will make it an easy picking and a free kill for anyone that does manage to claim that. Right and left arm of Charge Blade is a conventional melee skill that gets a damage plus relative to the amount of charge in the user's Metaforce gauge, and in addition will consume a small amount of charge when attacking. Now this usually means that you only get a couple good hits before it does end up using itself up, but of course if you manage to use a hunter or a sniper nature medal, you can honestly curb this relatively easily once you get a charge going. Float Legs means that Xianglong has very good coverage across all terrains at an A rank across the board, and of course S rank on Cyber, which everybody gets, and even if he is just a little squishy in the HP department, he does honestly make it back and can make himself a very easy menace if used correctly. In this form, he does pack a head HP of about 3450, arms about 2800 each, which is actually relatively low compared to where you'd see most conventional fighters like Xianglong across the board as more of a norm. And leg HP of about 3500 means he will have a relatively lower end kind of HP pool across the board, but his stats are still relatively good if used correctly. With a base mobility of 787, he's definitely on the higher end compared to where most other float legs are, and not quite boss type, but also not quite conventional float either, which means even before any other bonuses or terrain compatibility, he is definitely going to have speed on his side. Melee resist of 1246 means that he can definitely hold his own up close and personal very, very easily, but a shoot resist of 543 is definitely going to be a pain point for him, as this does mean that when facing enemies from afar, they are going to have a much easier time taking pot shots at him and absolutely making the most of his relatively weak armor to shooting attacks. An evade of 933 is honestly still nice though, as it means he will have a relatively decent time dodging or grazing a pretty fair number of attacks, especially ones that have very low success. Now, Xianglong, for anyone that has played Medarot 9 or has seen gameplay of it, is also capable of a transformation mode in Meta Change, where he will expand his body into that of a long emerald dragon, hence his name and motif. In this form, he changes his kit more or less from a conventional fighter kit into a dedicated ailment and off-field support kit. In this mode, his kit is Fire, Deathlock, Repair, Light Legs, and the leg ability of Blowbeat, which ignores a portion of resist stats when attacking an enemy. Now, Fire in this is pretty much the same as it was with his head part in robot mode. Attacking an enemy will inflict them with the DOT and whittle their HP down over time, as long as the ailment stays in effect. Deathlock is arguably one of the most popular when it comes to negative ailments, and upon inflicting it in a target, it will inflict them with no dodge and no defend, and in addition will also debuff their heat and cool stats by 25%. This means that they not only will be going just a little bit slower than they were before, but all hits are guaranteed to land and are also guaranteed to be as painful as possible with a guaranteed critical hit on top of that. Repair is a healing-based skill that, once used, will restore a fair amount of lost HP to the user or to an ally relative to the healing skill level on the medal. So this honestly does kind of tie back to Xianglong's kit overall when it comes to shape memory and his low HP count, as this means that even upon restoring HP to himself, say if he lost an arm, he can kind of make back some of that missing HP that he used up, as long as he can transform to do so. And given that his repair skill does not require any charge, he can honestly transform back and forth as necessary and heal as many times as he wants. Whereas Fire and Deathlock in this form may hit a lot harder, but they do also have a charge cost of 10 CG each. In this mode, he also does pool everything together to make his stats just a little bit better all around when it comes to his overall survivability. A total HP pool of 12.5k is honestly really good, but kind of middle of the road to a point depending on how you look at it. Melee resist of 13-18 is still very, very nice, not as much of a change compared to where he was before, but a shoot resist of 10-29 is a massive upgrade, and this will make him much, much more resistant to shooting-based attacks, and they won't cripple him as easily. As a flight-legged type, he does have the naturally high mobility and evade at 1004 for his mobility, and an evade of almost 2000, which will make him a lot easier to either dodge or graze a lot of attacks while in this form. That being said, as a pure set score, I do honestly have to rate Xianglong a relatively solid 7 out of 10. Even though he does look relatively squishy at first glance, and the fact that he is Metaforce reliant does make him a little tricky to use at the start of a battle. But if you can manage to keep him going with survivability, he honestly does round himself out relatively nicely between his robot mode and his meta change mode to make him a relatively solid conventional ailment fighter and conventional melee fighter on top of that, allowing him to fill 2 roles in one just by being on the field. Now, unfortunately, because his meta change mode does specialize in ailments, that does mean anyone that is using Stat Cleanse will very largely negate a good chunk of what Xianglong can bring to the table. But all the same, even if they do or they don't, Xianglong still is a relatively nasty force to be reckoned with once he's got a charge going. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him relatively equally actually at about a 7 out of 10 as well, given that even though he is packing a lot of nice stats in his meta change mode and definitely a little more resistant and dodgy while in Dragon mode, you really aren't going to be missing a lot in terms of switching between modes and using him as a pure set. As even in Robot mode by himself, he does have a relatively solid float type leg, even if his shoot resist is kind of low, very good charge blades that are also non-heavy, and a head part that also is a conventional skill if you need it.